Thank you for the opportunity to present today on the NBCRNA Continued Professional Certification or CPC program. But first, I'd like to take a moment and acknowledge the excellent work and dedication of the volunteers associated with the diversity program and the outstanding leadership provided by Dr. Walina Gould. Today we'll talk about the what, how, and where of the NBCRNA Continued Professional Certification program. As with any new program, it takes time to really understand the program and the next steps. My goal today is to walk you through the CPC program so you leave with a much better understanding of the program, how to navigate it, and know where to find additional resources. Today we'll talk about the value of the credential, lifelong learning throughout your career, the relationship to the initial certification, and the elements of the Continued Professional Certification program. At the NBCRNA, our mission is to promote patient safety through credentialing programs that support lifelong learning, and our vision is to be recognized as the leader in advanced practice nurse credentialing. Certification serves two extremely important roles. Certification functions to protect and benefit the public, and certification assures the public that the CRNA has met predetermined qualifications to provide nurse anesthesia care. This timeline highlights some of the milestones in the development of CRNA certification, beginning with Gertrude Fife's presentation to the American Association of Nurse Anesthetists in 1933 through a 55-year period culminating in the establishment of the certification exam for nurse anesthetists. Students entering nurse anesthesia educational programs bring with them their critical thinking skills and critical care experiences. The nurse anesthesia educational programs build on those skills and experiences through the applications of rigorous didactic and clinical curricula. During their program, students may take the Self-Evaluation Exam, or C, which has a strong predictive correlation for success on the National Certification Examination. After entry into the profession, CRNAs continue their lifelong learning through practice and continuing education and participation in the Continued Professional Certification program. When we compare the C and NCE exams with the CPCA, there are important differences to point out. The C and NCE cover all of the entire landscape of nursing anesthesia knowledge necessary to enter the profession, and that includes physiology, pharmacology, chemistry, biochemistry, physics, equipment, instrumentation and technology, basic and advanced principles. The CPCA, on the other hand, covers those domains necessary for nurse anesthetists to practice safely, irrespective of their practice setting. Today, I'll begin with an overview of the CPC program, going over the timeline and what needs to be done. Then we'll look more closely at each of the components, starting with the Class A and B credits, including how to report them. I'll talk about the core modules and where to find them, the midpoint check-in, the CPC assessment, and discuss the program's costs and goals and the next steps. Almost everything in this talk is intentionally repeated at least twice, but in different ways. So you can relax and listen and not worry if you feel you might miss something. It will be coming around again later in the presentation. So let's review the overall CPC program. The CPC program is a multimodal platform with components that work together to create a program that encourages and supports lifelong learning. There are Class A credits, Class B credits, core modules, the CPC assessment, and the midpoint check-in during each 4-year cycle. The CPC program is 8 years in length and is comprised of 2 4-year cycles. There is something to do every 2 years. Each 4-year cycle includes these components: We'll talk more about each component later in this presentation. But let's just look at the list briefly. Class A credits are continuing education that includes some sort of an assessment. They most resemble CEs that you got in the previous program. Class B credits recognize professional development activities that many of us do in our everyday work, like life support, attending M&M conferences, committee work, and precepting students, to name just a few. The core modules are groupings of educational content designed to bring current information to CRNAs based on published evidence from the past 5 years. They were optional in the first 4-year cycle, but after you renew your certification and begin your second 4-year cycle, they will be a required component. Finally, at the 8-year mark, there will be a CPC assessment. It is no longer a pass-fail assessment and is not like the NCE exam or the boards that you took when you first entered the profession. We'll go over the assessment details later in depth. At the halfway mark in each 4-year cycle is the check-in. This corresponds to the same timing as the former recertification program, that is, every 2 years. The CPC program components work together to support lifelong learning. Every 4 years, you will apply to renew your CRNA credential. This is when you will need to have completed your required Class A and B credits and the core modules, which are optional in the first 4-year cycle but are required thereafter. When you apply to renew your certification, you will review your license and practice, provide attestations that support your eligibility to continue to hold the credential, and verify your completion of Class A and Class B credits, core modules, and any other elements that are required for your cycle completion. So let's go over the timing of the requirements. Let's look at the first 4-year cycle. You will earn a minimum of 100 credits per 4-year cycle, of which at least 60 must be Class A credits, or an average of 15 per year, and at least 40 Class B credits. Now here's a tip. You can use extra Class A credits over the required 60 towards fulfillment of the Class B credit requirement. At the midpoint of each 4-year cycle, you will complete your simple online check-in. The core modules were optional in the first 4-year cycle and are required beginning your second 4-year cycle for all cycles that renew or begin after January 1st, 2020. For many of the nation's more than 55,000 CRNAs, this first 4-year cycle is 2016 to 2020 or 2017 to 2021. For those of you who fall into the 2016 to 2020 period, many of you have already renewed your credential and have moved into your second 4-year cycle. Now, let's move on to the second 4-year cycle. The requirements in the first 4-year cycle and the second 4-year cycle are nearly the same, but in the second 4-year cycle, you will also take the CPC assessment. We'll go over each of the requirements in more detail in this presentation. We also encourage you to visit the CPC page on the NBCRNA website to access this timeline in the interactive format and learn more about the CPC program and the requirements of each 4-year cycle. Now let's talk a little bit more specifically about Class A credits, how you can earn them, and how to track or document them. An average of 15 Class A CEs per year are required, or 60 total per 4-year CPC cycle. Most of the continuing education you are already used to doing will be Class A. When thinking about Class A activities, consider 3 things. Number 1, is it prior approved? Has an accredited CE approval organization like the AANA reviewed and prior approved it? Number 2, is it related to nurse anesthesia? Does the content relate to the delivery of anesthesia care or the improvement of delivery of anesthesia care to patients? Number 3, is it assessed? Does the activity show how learning informs or improves anesthesia care? Depending on educational activity, self-assessment, demonstrations, polling, case studies, simulations, and post-tests are all valid forms of assessment. Some examples of Class A credits are life support programs, Journal CE, online webinars and courses, and prior approved in-person events. As far as documenting Class A credits, credits for ANA members are automatically reported to the NBCRNA. For those without automatic credit transfer from the ANA, you will report your Class A credits directly to the NBCRNA at the time when you apply for your recertification renewal every 4 years. Now let's talk a little bit more specifically about Class B credits, how you earn them, and how to track or document them. We received many questions about the Class B requirement. What they are, why do we have them, how do I earn them, how do I track them? Class B credits are professional development activities. They are not CE. So they don't have to be assessed and do not have to be prior approved. If you use excess Class A credits to fulfill your Class B requirement, you might be using assessed and prior approved content, but they do not have to be either of those things to satisfy Class B credits. 40 Class B credits are required in each 4-year CPC cycle. Why are they included in the CPC program? By including professional development activities, the CPC program acknowledges the diversity of professional activities and experiences of nurse anesthetists who are being increasingly called upon to attain competencies beyond clinical knowledge and practice. An activity can be considered for Class B credit if it meets one or more of these 3 definitions. 1, if it supports patient safety, or 2, enhances the anesthetist's foundational knowledge of nurse anesthesia practice, or 3, fosters the nurse anesthetist's understanding of the broader healthcare environment. You can track them on your own, or if you are an ANA member, you can also choose to upload them into the ANA Learn portal. And we'll talk more about how to track Class B credits a little bit later. The Class B component is the most flexible component of the CPC program, and there are 3 options to meet the Class B requirement. You can use extra Class A credits over the required 60 towards the Class B requirement. Or you can earn all 40 as purely Class B credits, or you can use a combination of extra Class A credits over the required 60 and combine them with earned Class B credits. Now let's review the core modules. The core modules share a content outline with the CPC assessment, but their focus is narrower than the assessment and concentrate on new and emerging information. The modules are created to be consistent with a standardized set of performance objectives that relate to the 4 domains of anesthesia practice. Those domains are airway management technique, applied clinical pharmacology, human physiology and pathophysiology, and anesthesia equipment and technology. Now, core modules also count as Class A credits, so the credits earned as core modules can apply to your 60 Class A credit requirement, a double dip of sorts since they are prior approved Class A CE content. At the midpoint of each 4-year cycle is the check-in. The check-in is a simple online process that can be completed on your computer, smartphone, or on a tablet in about 5 minutes. Beginning in 2020, there is no longer a fee associated with the midpoint check-in. Based on CRNA feedback, the CPC fee will now coincide with the 4-year certification renewal application for your upcoming 4 years of certification. The fee is $250. Now, it's important to remember you do not have to have earned or report any Class A or Class B credits or core modules at the mid-cycle check-in. The check-in is designed to keep CRNAs on track for maintaining their certification by ensuring that, number 1, your license is up to date, and this is a requirement of the NBCRNA's accreditors. You are in active practice in nurse anesthesia. Now, that can be clinical, educational, research, or administration, and the NBCRNA does not prescribe a minimum amount of time to be considered active. You will have the opportunity to update your contact information. While this seems simple, it is very important because every year thousands of CRNAs move and change their information. Just last year, 20% of those who checked in needed to update their contact information. It's extremely important that we have your current information so that we can contact you about your certification. And finally, at the check-in, you can check your progress towards your completion of your CPC requirements and plan for upcoming CE. The NBCRNA will notify you by email when it's time to do your check. So always make sure your contact information is updated in your NBCRNA portal. Now let's go over the CPC assessment component. The CPC assessment will be a 150-question, 3-hour closed book assessment taken every 8 years, either at home or at a test center. It's up to you. It's your choice. Following a beta research study and a benchmarking study in 2018, the NBCRNA announced in early 2019 the removal of the pass-fail requirement for the CPC assessment. Now let me repeat that. There is no pass-fail requirement for the CPC assessment. It is no longer pass-fail. Instead, you can use the CPC assessment as a self-evaluation tool as part of lifelong learning to better direct your continuing education selections. There is still an assessment every 8 years, but it will remain a performance standard assessment only, not a pass-fail. These changes to the CPC program came as a result of an extensive research study on the CPC assessment involving the participation of more than 1,500 CRNAs, as well as a nationwide benchmarking study. Let's look at the costs of the CPC program and where you can find additional information about your next steps. This chart details all costs on a per-year average, including the core modules and CPC assessment. There have been many questions about costs of the CPC program compared to the previous recertification program. Contrary to some misinformation that is out there, and this chart illustrates, the CPC program can actually cost CRNAs about $100 less per year on average than the legacy recertification program. As we noted earlier when we talked about the check-in, starting this year in 2020, there will no longer be a fee at the check-in. Instead, the CPC fee will be every 4 years during your CPC certification renewal application. As always, this is for the upcoming 4 years of certification. Again, the CPC fee is paid every 4 years and will be $250, and this is for the upcoming 4 years of certification. The NBCRNA website also has a great deal of information about the CPC program and resources to help you navigate the program. We encourage you to go to the site for information, charts, videos, a CPC calculator, which is an especially great tool to provide you with your personalized CPC path, the Class B table, frequently asked questions, and even more. Podcasts, too, are now available to provide another platform for learning about the CPC program on the go. The ANA's website is another good resource of information. The AANA and the NBCRNA are working together to make sure that you have the information you need about the CPC program. If you follow NBCRNA on social media, you'll see sample questions posted each Friday, the question of the week. You can also read those on the question of the week page of the website. The CPC program supports lifelong learning and the strong CRNA credential, protecting your ability to continue practicing as a CRNA, and is designed to meet the APRN regulatory requirements of every state's Board of Nursing. The program also reinforces the validity and the value of your CRNA credential. demonstrating to your patients, their families, and your employer that you meet the credentialing requirements designed to promote lifelong learning, help you maintain current anesthesia knowledge, and encourage patient safety, even as the healthcare environment constantly changes. I hope this presentation has helped you have a better understanding of the CPC program, and please visit the NBCRNA website to learn more about the CPC program.